A fragile piece. The stars stretched into infinity on the bridge view screen of the gas Valiant, their cold light a stark contrast to the warm, living bustle of the Galactic Alliance's most advanced warship. Captain Amara Saren stood at the center of the bridge, her sharp blue eyes scanning the tactical displays. "Status report, Commander Varric," she called out to her first officer. The tall, lean Theronian swiveled in his chair to face her. "All systems nominal, Captain. We're cruising at warp 8.5. ETA to Frontier Gamma Colony is 6 hours." Varric's eyes gleamed with the same excitement Saren felt. After months patrolling the border between Galactic Alliance space and the Zorgan Empire, they were finally embarking on a mission of discovery. Frontier Gamma Colony had missed its last 3 scheduled check-ins. A ship had been dispatched to investigate, only to disappear as well. Now it fell to the Valiant, with its state-of-the-art stealth technologies and formidable arsenal, to uncover the truth. Saren nodded, settling into the captain's chair. "Good. Maintain course and speed. Lieutenant Commander Zahn, continue long-range scans. I want to know about anything out there bigger than a micrometeoroid." The Valiant's senior science officer, an Azorian with pale blue skin and a shock of white hair, tapped at his console. "Aye, Captain. So far, nothing but dust and echoes." The bridge doors whooshed open, and Lieutenant Kira Valen, the ship's chief engineer, strode in, her auburn hair pulled back in a tight braid. "Captain, the new quantum torpedoes are fully integrated with the targeting matrix. We'll be ready to fire them on your order." "Let's hope we don't need them, Valen," Saren replied. "The peace with the Zorgans is fragile enough without us lighting up the sky with new ordnance." The Galactic Alliance and the Zorgan Empire had been locked in a cold war for decades, neither side willing to commit to open hostilities, but both engaging in an ever-escalating arms race. The Valiant represented the pinnacle of the Alliance's military might, a deterrent to Zorgan aggression, and a guardian of humanity's expanding stellar domain. As the hours ticked by, Saren found herself drawn into the rhythms of shipboard life, reviewing reports, conferring with her officers, and studying the long-range sensor data. Despite the undercurrent of tension that came with any foray into the unknown, she felt a profound sense of pride and purpose. The Valiant was more than a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience and determination. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on long-range sensors," Zahn called out, his voice tight with concern. "It's an energy signature, unlike anything in our databases, and it's coming from the direction of Frontier Gamma Colony." Saren felt a chill run down her spine. "Put it on the main view screen." The starfield on the screen magnified, zooming in on a distant point of light. As the image resolved, Saren's breath caught in her throat. It was a ship, but unlike any she had ever seen. It was massive, easily dwarfing the Valiant, with a dark, angular hull that seemed to absorb the light around it. Strange, glowing sigils pulsed along its surface, and a sickly green aura surrounded its engines. "By the stars," Varric whispered, "what is that thing?" Saren stood, her heart pounding. Whatever it is, it's not Zorgan, and it's heading straight for the colony. She turned to her crew, her voice ringing with authority. "Red alert. All hands to battle stations. Varric, increase speed to maximum warp. Valen, divert all power to shields and weapons. Zahn, keep scanning. I want to know everything about that ship before we engage." As the bridge erupted into controlled chaos, Saren gripped the arms of her chair, her mind racing. The Valiant had been built to face any threat. But this was something new, something terrifying. And yet, as the adrenaline surged through her veins, Saren felt a flicker of exhilaration. This was what she had trained for, what she had dreamed of since she first set foot on the bridge of a starship. The chance to push herself and her crew to the limit, to stare into the face of the unknown, and emerge victorious. The Valiant leaped forward, the stars blurring into streaks of light as the mighty ship closed the distance to the alien intruder. Saren's eyes locked on the view screen, her breath even, her focus absolute. "This is Captain Amara Saren of the Galactic Alliance ship Valiant." She broadcast on all frequencies. "Unknown vessel, you are trespassing in Alliance space and endangering a human colony. Identify yourself and state your intentions." For a long, tense moment, there was only silence. Then, a deep, resonant voice filled the bridge, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We are the XR Thun," it said, each word dripping with menace. "Your colonies, your alliances, your petty wars, they mean nothing to us. This galaxy is ours to consume, and your species is nothing more than fuel for our ascendants." Saren felt a cold knot of fear in her gut, but she pushed it aside. "XR Thun vessel, stand down and prepare to be boarded. This is your final warning." A chilling laugh echoed through the bridge. "Warning? You dare to warn us, creature of flesh and bone? You have no conception of the powers you face, but you will learn, as your colonies burn and your ships are scattered like dust on the solar winds." With a blinding flash, the XR Thun ship vanished, leaving only a fading energy signature and a profound sense of dread in its wake. Saren slumped back in her chair, her mind whirling. "Varric, estimated time to Frontier Gamma Colony. 2 hours, Captain." "Make it 1, she ordered. "Zahn, analyze that energy signature. Find me a way to track them. Valen, I want damage control teams on standby and all weapons primed." As her crew leaked into action, Saren closed her eyes for a moment, reaching for the calm center within herself. The XR Thun, whoever or whatever they were, had thrown down a gauntlet. The fragile piece that had held the galaxy together for so long was unraveling, and the Valiant, and Amara Saren, would be the first to face the oncoming storm. She opened her eyes, staring into the starfield on the view screen. "Hold on, Frontier Gamma," she whispered. "We're coming, and we will not fail you." The Valiant surged onward, a lance of light and hope in the gathering darkness, ready to face the greatest challenge humanity had ever known: the colony's fate. The Valiant dropped out of warp at the edge of the Frontier Gamma system, its sleek hull glinting in the light of the distant sun. Captain Saren leaned forward in her chair, her eyes scanning the tactical displays. "Report," she barked. Commander Varric shook his head. "No signs of the XR Thun ship, Captain, but I'm picking up debris in orbit around the colony world. A lot of it." Saren's stomach clenched. Life signs. Lieutenant Commander Zahn consulted his scanners. "None that I can detect, Captain, but there's a lot of interference. If there are survivors, they might be shielded from our scans." Saren nodded. "Valen, prepare a landing party. Full tactical gear. I want Marines and medics ready to deploy at a moment's notice." The chief engineer nodded crisply. "Aye, Captain." As the Valiant glided into orbit, the full extent of the devastation became clear. The colony's orbital defenses had been shattered, reduced to drifting clouds of twisted metal and frozen bodies. On the planet's surface, the once thriving settlement was a smoldering ruin, its buildings reduced to rubble and ash. Saren's heart ached at the sight, but she pushed her emotions aside. There would be time to grieve later. Now her duty was to the living, if there were any left to save. "Varric, you have the bridge. I'm leading the landing party myself." The first officer started to object, but the look in Saren's eyes silenced him. He simply nodded and took his place in the command chair. Minutes later, Saren stood in the Valiant's shuttle bay, a pulse rifle cradled in her arms. Her team, a dozen Marines, a handful of medics, and Lieutenant Commander Zahn, waited in tense silence as the shuttle's hatch hissed open. The first thing that struck Saren was the silence. The colony had been home to over 10,000 people, a bustling hub of activity and life. Now there was only the whisper of the wind and the crunch of debris beneath their boots. They moved through the ruined streets, scanning for any signs of life. But everywhere they looked, they found only death. Bodies lay strewn across the ground. their faces frozen in expressions of terror and agony. Many bore the marks of energy weapons, their flesh seared and blackened. Zahn knelt beside one of the bodies, his scanner whirring. "Captain, these wounds, they're not consistent with any weapon I've seen before. The energy signature is similar to the XR Thun ship, but different." Saren frowned. "What do you mean, different?" The science officer shook his head. "I can't explain it. It's like the weapons were designed to cause maximum suffering, to inflict pain beyond just physical damage." A chill ran down Saren's spine. What kind of enemy were they facing? What sort of twisted mind would create such horrors? As they pressed deeper into the ruins, a flicker of movement caught Saren's eye. She signaled her team to halt, raising her rifle. "Come out slowly, hands where I can see them," she called out. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a figure stumbled out from behind a shattered wall. It was a human, a man in the tattered remnants of a colonial uniform. His face was ashen, his eyes haunted. "Thank the stars," he whispered. I thought I was the only one left." Saren lowered her weapon, stepping forward. "I'm Captain Amara Saren of the Gas Valiant. We're here to help. What happened here?" The survivor shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "They came out of nowhere. Giant ships, like living shadows. They killed everyone. They didn't just kill them. They savored it, like they were feeding on our pain, our fear." Saren's blood ran cold. "The XR Thun," she whispered. The man nodded. "That's what they call themselves. They said we were just the beginning, that all the galaxy would fall before them." Zahn stepped forward, his scanner beeping urgently. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy surge. Multiple hyperspace signatures. They're heading right for us." Saren's head snapped up, her eyes widening. "Back to the shuttle. Now. We have to warn the Valiant." They raced through the ruins, the survivors stumbling between them. Behind them, the sky began to darken, the stars obscured by the hulking shapes of Thun warships dropping out of hyperspace. They had barely reached the shuttle when the first energy beams lanced down from orbit, vaporizing the ruins around them. Saren shoved the survivor inside, slamming her hand on the hatch controls. "Get us out of here now," she shouted to the pilot. The shuttle leaped into the sky, weaving frantically as the XR Thun ships opened fire. The Valiant loomed ahead, its shields shimmering as it absorbed the brunt of the onslaught. Saren gripped the shuttle's bulkhead, her knuckles white. They had found their answers, but at what cost? The colony was lost, its people slaughtered. And now the Valiant faced an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. As the shuttle streaked into the Valiant's hangar bay, Saren's mind raced. The XR Thun's cruelty, their sheer destructive power, it defied comprehension. But one thing was crystal clear. The war for the galaxy had begun, and the Gas Valiant was the only thing standing between humanity and annihilation. The shuttle's hatch hissed open, and Saren leaped out, barking orders. "All hands, battle stations. Velen, divert all power to shields and weapons. Varric, evasive maneuvers. Zahn, get that survivor to sickbay, and see what else you can learn about that XR Thun's capabilities." As her crew scrambled to their posts, Saren strode onto the bridge, her face set in grim determination. On the view screen, the XR Thun fleet loomed, a nightmare made manifest. "This is it, people," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "This is what we trained for, what we swore to defend against. The XR Thun think they can break us, that they can shatter our resolve with fear and cruelty." She took her seat in the command chair, her eyes blazing. "But they don't know the true strength of humanity. They don't know the courage, the determination, the sheer stubborn will that drives us. They think they found easy prey." Her lips curled in a fierce smile. "Let's show them just how wrong they are. Let's show them the power of the Valiant, and the indomitable spirit of the Galactic Alliance. A cheer went up from the bridge crew, a defiant roar in the face of the oncoming storm. The Valiant surged forward, its weapons blazing, ready to meet the Xarthun head-on. And in that moment, Captain Amara Seren knew with a certainty that blazed in her soul that no matter the odds, no matter the cost, humanity would not go quietly into the night. They would fight, they would endure, and they would triumph, as they always had, against the darkness that sought to consume them. The battle for the galaxy had begun, and the Gas Valiant would lead the charge, against all odds. The Gas Valiant shuddered as another volley of Xarthun energy beams slammed into its shields. On the bridge, Captain Seren gripped the arms of her chair, her eyes locked on the tactical display. Shields at 60%, Commander Varric reported, his voice tense. They're hitting us with everything they've got. Seren nodded grimly. That Xarthun ships outnumbered them 12 to 1, and their weapons were frighteningly powerful. But the Valiant was no ordinary ship, and her crew was no ordinary crew. Valen, status on the quantum torpedoes? Seren asked. The chief engineer's face appeared on the comm screen, streaked with sweat and grime. Ready to fire on your command, Captain. But we only have a few shots. We have to make them count. Seren's mind raced, analyzing the Xarthun fleet's formation. There, the largest ship, hanging back behind the front lines. The command ship. Varric, plot a course straight for that lead ship. Full impulse. Valen, divert all non-essential power to the forward shields. The Valiant surged forward, its engines roaring as it plunged headlong into the teeth of the Xarthun onslaught. Energy beams hammered at its shields, but the mighty ship pushed through, closing the distance to its target. Fire quantum torpedoes, Seren commanded. A salvo of glowing blue projectiles erupted from the Valiant's forward tubes, streaking towards the Xarthun command ship. The alien vessel tried to evade, but it was too late. The torpedoes struck home, piercing its shields and burrowing deep into its hull. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the command ship exploded in a blinding flash of light, its reactor core going critical. The shockwave slammed into the surrounding Xarthun ships, sending them tumbling off course. A cheer went up from the Valiant's bridge crew. But Seren held up a hand, her eyes narrowing. It's not over yet, she warned. Look. On the view screen, the remaining Xarthun ships were regrouping, moving to flank the Valiant on all sides. And in the center of their formation, a new ship was emerging, larger and more menacing than any they had seen before. By the stars, Varric whispered. What is that thing? Zahn's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, I'm picking up a massive energy reading from that ship. It's off the charts, like nothing I have ever seen. Seren's blood ran cold. The Xarthun had been holding back. This was their true power, a weapon capable of annihilating entire fleets. All hands, brace for impact, she shouted. The Xarthun dreadnought opened fire, a beam of pure, searing darkness that cut through space like a scythe. It struck the Valiant's shields and passed right through them, shearing off one of the ship's nacelles in a shower of molten metal. The bridge shook violently, sparks cascading from ruptured conduits. Seren was thrown from her chair, slamming into the deck with a grunt of pain. Damage report, she yelled, dragging herself back to her feet. Varric's face was ashen. Heavy damage to decks 12 through 15. Shields are down. Weapons offline. Captain, we're dead in the water. Seren's mind reeled. This couldn't be happening. The Valiant, the pride of the Galactic Alliance, reduced to a helpless hulk in a matter of seconds. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm her, a voice cut through the chaos. The voice of the survivor they had rescued from the colony. Captain Seren, he said, limping onto the bridge. There might be a way. Seren turned to face him, her eyes wide. What do you mean? The man took a deep, shuddering breath. When the Xarthun attacked the colony, Some of us managed to get a scan of their ships. We found a weakness, a flaw in their reactor design. He hobbled to Zahn's console, his fingers flying over the controls. A schematic of the XR-Thun dreadnought appeared on the screen, a pulsing red spot highlighting its reactor core. If you can hit that exact spot with a concentrated burst of quantum torpedoes, it should trigger a chain reaction. Destroy the ship from the inside out. Saren stared at the schematic, her heart pounding. It was a desperate plan, a one-in-a-million shot, but it was their only chance. She turned to Valen, her voice steady. "Can you get the weapons back online?" The engineer hesitated, then nodded. "I can reroute power from life support. Give you one shot. But Captain, it'll blow out our whole system. We'll be completely vulnerable." Saren closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. The lives of her crew, the fate of the galaxy, all hanging in the balance. She opened her eyes, her resolve hardening. Do it. As Valen raced to make the modifications, Saren turned to Varric. "Bring us about, straight at that dreadnought, and broadcast on all frequencies. Let that XR-Thun hear this." She stepped forward, her voice ringing out across the bridge. "This is Captain Amara Saren of the Gas Valiant. You think you've beaten us. You think you've broken our spirit, but you underestimate the strength of humanity." On the view screen, that XR-Thun dreadnought loomed, its weapons glowing as it prepared to finish off the crippled Valiant. "We will not yield," Saren continued, her eyes blazing. "We will not surrender. We will fight to our last breath, to defend the ones we love and the ideals we hold dear." The Valiant surged forward, its engines straining as it hurtled towards the XR-Thun ship. "And if we die today, we die knowing that our sacrifice will light the fire of resistance across the galaxy. That our stand here, against impossible odds, will inspire others to rise up and fight on." Saren's hand hovered over the weapon's control, her heart pounding. On the screen, the dreadnought's reactor core pulsed, a glowing bullseye. "So come on, you bastards," she whispered. "Let's finish this." Her hand slammed down on the control. A single quantum torpedo burst from the Valiant's forward tube, screaming across the void. It struck the XR-Thun dreadnought dead center, piercing its reactor core. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. And then the ship exploded, a sun-going supernova. The shockwave slammed into the Valiant, sending it tumbling end over end. Consoles exploded, bodies flew across the bridge. And then, silence. That XR-Thun fleet was gone, reduced to drifting wreckage. The Valiant hung in space, battered and broken, but alive. On the bridge, Captain Saren pulled herself to her feet, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. She looked around at her crew, at the smiles of triumph and relief on their faces. They had done it, against all odds, against an enemy that had seemed invincible. They had won. But even as the realization sank in, Saren knew that this was only the beginning. That XR-Thun had been defeated here, but there would be others. The galaxy was a vast and dangerous place, and humanity's struggle was far from over. But for now, in this moment, they could savor their victory. They could stand tall and proud, knowing that when put to the ultimate test, the human spirit had proven unbreakable. The Gas Valiant, broken but unbowed, turned its battered prow towards home, towards a future that, though uncertain, was theirs to shape. And Captain Amara Saren knew with a certainty that blazed in her soul that no matter what trials lay ahead, humanity would face them head-on, with courage, with determination, and with the indomitable will that had carried them to the stars. The price of victory. The journey back to Galactic Alliance space was a somber one. The Valiant, once a gleaming beacon of human ingenuity and strength, limped through the void, its hull scorched and pitted, its corridors echoing with the ghosts of the fallen. In the sick bay, the wounded lay in row upon row, their moans and cries a constant reminder of the price they had paid for their victory. The medics worked tirelessly, but there were so many, and the ship's resources were stretched to the breaking point. Captain Saren stood at the observation window, her eyes haunted as she watched the stars drift by. They had won, yes, but at what cost? So many lives lost, so much destruction. And for what? A moment's respite, a fleeting triumph in a war that had only just begun. She was shaken from her dark thoughts by a soft chime from her comm badge. Captain Saren, please report to engineering. It's urgent. Saren frowned, a flicker of unease running through her. Urgent calls from engineering were rarely good news. She strode through the Valiant's battered corridors, her boots ringing on the metal deck plates. Crew members scurried past her, their faces drawn and exhausted, but they still managed to stand a little straighter as she passed, their eyes shining with a fierce pride. They had been through hell together, this crew. They had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. That kind of bond, forged in the crucible of battle, was not easily broken. As Saren entered engineering, she was struck immediately by the tension in the air. Lieutenant Commander Zahn and Lieutenant Valen stood hunched over a console, their faces grim. "Report," Saren said, the single word loaded with authority. Valen looked up, her eyes shadowed. "Captain, we found something. Something disturbing." She tapped a control, and a schematic of the Valiant appeared on the screen. A pulsing red light blinked in the depths of the ship's reactor core. "What am I looking at?" Saren asked, a cold knot forming in her gut. "A bomb," Zahn said flatly. "A quantum resonance charge, rigged to detonate when we drop out of warp. It'll tear the ship apart, and take a good chunk of the space station with it." Saren's blood ran cold. Sabotage. But how? Who? Valen shook her head. "That's the thing, Captain. According to the computer logs, it was placed there by Commander Varric." Saren stared at her, uncomprehending. "Varric? But that's impossible. He's been with me on the bridge since." Her voice trailed off, a horrifying realization dawning. Since they had brought the survivor from Frontier Gamma aboard. "Find him," she whispered, her voice trembling with a rage she barely recognized. "Find him now." It didn't take long. They found Varric, or the thing that had been Varric, in his quarters, hunched over a flickering alien device. He looked up as Saren burst in, flanked by a pair of grim-faced Marines. His eyes were cold, empty, inhuman. "You're too late, Captain," he said, his voice a mocking echo of the man she had known. "The seeds have been planted. The Exarathun will rise, and your pitiful alliance will fall." Saren's hand twitched towards her sidearm, but she held herself back with an effort of will. "What have you done, Varric? What have you become?" The thing smiled, a ghastly stretching of lips over teeth. "I have seen the truth, Captain. The Exarathun showed me the way. They are not our enemy, but our salvation, our ascension." He gestured to the device, his eyes gleaming with a fervor that bordered on madness. "This is but the first step. There are others like me, seated throughout your precious alliance. We will strike from within, and you will never see us coming." Saren's heart hammered in her chest, a sickening realization washing over her. The survivor from the colony. It had all been a ruse, a Trojan horse, to get an agent aboard the Valiant. And she had fallen for it. They all had. The Marines advanced, weapons drawn, but Varric, or the thing that wore his face, simply laughed. His hand darted out, faster than the eye could follow, and pressed a button on the alien device. And then he was gone, his body dissolving into a swirl of dark energy that vanished through the bulkhead like a ghost. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then Saren was moving, barking orders into her comm badge. "Zahn, Valen, can you disarm the bomb?" There was a tense pause, then Zahn's voice crackled back. "Negative, Captain. It's rigged with a fail-safe. Any attempt to tamper with it will set it off." Saren closed her eyes, her mind racing. They couldn't disarm it. They couldn't escape it, which left only one option. "Evacuate the crew," she said, her voice steady despite the tempest raging inside her. Get everyone to the escape pods and plot a new course, straight for the heart of the nearest star. There was a shocked silence, then a babble of protests. Saren silenced them with a look. If that bomb goes off in populated space, millions could die. This is the only way. The Valiant must be destroyed. And so, with heavy hearts and tear-stained faces, the crew of the gas Valiant abandoned their wounded ship. They crowded into escape pods, watching through tiny portholes as their home, their fortress, dwindled to a speck against the stars. On the bridge, Captain Amara Saren stood alone, her hand resting on the worn leather of her chair. On the view screen, the swollen red orb of a dying star loomed, a monstrous eye waiting to swallow them whole. Saren's finger hovered over the control that would send the Valiant, and the insidious device within her, to a fiery grave. But even as she prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, a flicker of movement caught her eye. There on the edge of the system, a ship. No, a fleet. A ragtag collection of vessels of every size and description, bearing the marks of a dozen different species. And at their head, a sleek silver craft with the emblem of the Galactic Alliance emblazoned on its hull. "This is Admiral Nolan John of the Gas Intrepid," a voice crackled over the comm. "Captain Saren, you are ordered to stand down. We're here to bring you home." Saren stared at the screen, hardly daring to believe. They had come for her. For the Valiant. Even in their darkest hour, they were not alone. Tears streaming down her face, she guided the Valiant into the waiting arms of the rescue fleet. And as the quantum resonance charge was carefully extracted and neutralized, as the battered ship was towed back to the embrace of the Alliance, Saren finally allowed herself to breathe. They had paid a terrible price for their victory. They had lost comrades, friends, a part of themselves. And the revelation of the XR Thun's insidious infiltration had shaken the very foundations of their trust. But they had survived. Against all odds, against betrayal from within and a foe beyond imagining, they had endured. And as the Valiant slipped into the docking bay of the Galactic Alliance's central starbase, as Saren stepped out to be greeted by a sea of cheering faces and waving banners, she knew that their fight was far from over. The XR Thun were still out there, plotting and scheming, and their agents lurked in the shadows, waiting to strike at the heart of the Alliance. But they would be ready. The crew of the Valiant, the soldiers of the Alliance, the united peoples of the galaxy. They would stand together. They would fight, and bleed, and die if need be. But they would never, ever surrender. For this was their galaxy, their home. And they would defend it to their last breath. The story continues in Part 5. Brave New Worlds. Brave New Worlds. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was a cacophony of voices, 1,000 different species shouting and gesticulating in a babel of languages. At the center of the maelstrom, Captain Amara Saren stood tall and proud, her eyes blazing with a fierce determination. "Esteemed counselors," she began, her voice ringing out across the chamber. "I come before you today not as a conquering hero, but as a humble servant of the truth. And the truth is this. The XR Thun are not just another rival power. They are an existential threat to every sentient being in the galaxy." She gestured to the holoprojector, which sprang to life with images of the devastation at Frontier Gamma, of the twisted, lifeless hulks of the Valiant's sister ships, of the cold, inhuman visage of the thing that had once been Commander Varric. "This is what we face," Saren continued, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. "An enemy that seeks not just to conquer, but to corrupt, to twist our very souls to their will. An enemy that will stop at nothing until every last one of us is either enslaved or exterminated." The chamber erupted into chaos, 1,000 voices raised in fear, in anger, in denial. But Saren stood firm, her gaze sweeping across the assembled dignitaries. "I know you're afraid," she said, her voice cutting through the tumult like a beacon. "I am too. But we cannot let that fear paralyze us. We cannot let it divide us. For if we do, the Xarthun have already won. She stepped forward, her eyes shining with a fierce, unyielding hope. But I believe in us. I believe in the strength of the Galactic Alliance, in the courage and tenacity of every species, every civilization that calls this galaxy home. We have faced threats before, and we have overcome them, and we will do so again. The chamber fell silent, every eye fixed on the lone human standing at its heart. And in that moment, something shifted. A flicker of resolve, of unity, spreading from face to face like a flame. "The Gas Valiant will lead the charge," Saren declared, her voice ringing with conviction. "We will take the fight to the Xarthun, to strike at the heart of their power. But we cannot do it alone. We need every ship, every soldier, every resource the Alliance can muster." She looked out over the sea of faces, alien and familiar, friend and former foe. "So I ask you now, not as a captain, but as a fellow citizen of the galaxy, stand with us. Fight with us. Let us forge an alliance stronger than any the universe has ever seen, and let us show the Xarthun the true power of unity." For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, like a wave cresting, the chamber erupted. Not in chaos this time, but in cheers, in roars of approval and cries of solidarity. And as Saren stood amidst the tumult, tears of pride and relief stinging her eyes, she knew that this was only the beginning. In the weeks that followed, the Galactic Alliance mobilized like never before. Ships and soldiers poured in from every corner of the galaxy, a vast armada gathering under the banner of the Allied forces. And at the tip of the spear, the Gas Valiant gleamed, fully repaired and bristling with new weapons and defenses. Her crew, battle-hardened and tempered by loss, stood ready to face whatever horrors the cosmos could throw at them. But their mission would not be one of brute force. For even as the Allied forces gathered, troubling reports began to filter in from the fringes of Xarthun space. Whispers of dissent, of rebellion, of Xarthun worlds rising up against the tyranny of their own leaders. And so, as the Valiant set course for the heart of enemy territory, it carried not just weapons, but ambassadors, diplomats and scholars, tasked with reaching out to these dissident factions, with forging alliances that could strike at the Xarthun from within. It was a daring plan, a desperate plan. But as Saren stood on the bridge of her ship, watching the stars blur into the swirling vortex of hyperspace, she knew it was their best, perhaps their only hope. For that Xarthun were mighty, yes. Their technology, their mastery of the dark arts of the mind, made them a foe unlike any the galaxy had ever faced. But they were not invincible. They were not gods. And if the free peoples of the galaxy could stand together, if they could fight not just with weapons, but with compassion, with understanding, then perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a way to victory. Not a victory of conquest and domination, but of liberation, of breaking the chains of fear and oppression, and ushering in a new era of peace and cooperation. It was a dream, a fragile, elusive thing, born in the heart of a battle-weary captain on the edge of known space. But as the Valiant plunged onward into the unknown, as allies old and new rallied to her call, that dream began to take shape, began to grow and spread, like a flame kindling in the darkness. And though the road ahead was long and fraught with peril, though the shadow of the Xarthun still loomed large across the stars, for the first time in a long, long while, Captain Amara Saren allowed herself to hope. For the dream of a galaxy united, of a future free from fear, a brave new world waiting to be born in the crucible of the coming storm. The end. This completes the 5-part science fiction story, Unstoppable Force. Aliens confront humanity's most feared battleship. I hope you enjoyed this epic tale of courage, sacrifice, and the indomitable human spirit in the face of an existential threat. The crew of the Gas Valiant, led by Captain Amara Saren, have faced unimaginable horrors and impossible odds, But through their bravery and determination, they have sparked a flame of hope that will spread across the galaxy. Though the war against the XR Thun is far from over, the stage is set for a grand alliance of all free peoples to stand together against tyranny and oppression. It is a story of the power of unity, of the strength that can be found in diversity and cooperation. As we leave Captain Saren and her valiant crew, they stand on the threshold of a new era, one that they will help to shape with their courage, their compassion, and their unwavering commitment to the ideals of freedom and justice. It has been a pleasure crafting this story, and I hope it has entertained, thrilled, and perhaps even inspired you. The universe of the Galactic Alliance and the Gas Valiant is a rich tapestry waiting to be further explored. Who knows what adventures, what triumphs and tragedies await in the uncharted reaches of the cosmos. But for now, we leave our heroes as we found them, unbowed, unbroken, and ready to face whatever challenges the future may hold. For they are the guardians of the galaxy, the shield and sword of humanity and all free peoples. They are the crew of the Gas Valiant, and their story has only just begun.